here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting November the 11th, 2019. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. This week I wanted to work with tarot, and specifically I wanted to work with Tarot de Marseille. So the deck that's going to be assisting me for this week's reading is the CBD Tarot de Marseille, and the CBD is for Conver Ben-Dov. The deck is by the late Dr. Yoav Ben-Dov, and it is now published by US Game Systems Incorporated. So now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and take a look at what the Tarot de Marseille has to say about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I do, I'm focusing on the intention that I hold for these weekly general readings. And that is for the information, for the insight, for the guidance and advice that is going to be most helpful and beneficial to come through the cards. Pertaining to the experiences of the upcoming week. Feeling one more time will be good. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. I'm going to take a moment to fan the cards out. And I was feeling led and guided to work with the pyramid spread, so I'm going to be pulling 6 cards for that. And I'm just looking at the fan, seeing which cards are getting my attention. So I have the card selected. Now I'm going to take the remainder of the deck up, and we'll move that to one side. All right. Now I'm going to count back. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's my check. And now I'm going to take the cards in hand and I'm going to lay them out. If this is your first time here and you're seeing the pyramid spread being laid out, it goes like this. The top card, card 1, goes to the very top of the layout. And this is going to represent the central issue or focus for the week ahead. Then the next 2 cards, cards 2 and 3, go one step down the next tier. And they tell us more about the issue or the focus. These are like contributing factors, things that play a part in that. And then the last 3 cards go at the very bottom. And these could represent possible outcomes for the situation being reflected in the first 3 cards. All right, so I'm just taking a moment to see if the cards are straight. All right, that looks good to me. So I'm going to go ahead now and start looking at the cards individually, starting with the card that represents the central issue or focus. And here we have the Queen of Batons, or the Queen of Rods, or the Queen of Wands. So here we have a person card. So the way I'm going to talk about this card, I'm going to talk about it first in the literal sense, in terms of an actual person, and then I'm going to talk more about it as a possible approach that we are being asked to adopt throughout the week. So first, as a person, when I'm reading Tarot de Marseille, I read the queens as women. So this particular woman is the working woman or the businesswoman card in the deck for me. So this could be a situation where someone is dealing with a work-related issue or a business issue. Now, along with the metaphorical aspects of work and business, this could be, some work and effort that we need to put into a situation, or business at hand, right? So that would be the more metaphorical. But again, I see her first and foremost, I usually see her as a working woman or a businesswoman. Now, in the working environment or the business environment, she could be a woman in a position of authority because she's a queen and she's wearing a crown, right? So that could be a person who is a boss, a supervisor, a leader, someone who has some kind of position or holds some kind of position, right? And I'm playing on the idea that she's seated in a throne. So this could be maybe somebody who is a chair of a department or a chairperson even. And that would bring maybe the more public or social aspects of the suit of batons for me besides work and business. I also see this as, something having to do with the public or something of a social nature. So going with that, this could be somebody, like I said, who is a chair of a department or a chairperson. And in that regard, she would be somebody who collaborates with other people, brings people together. And in that regard, that touches on another aspect of the Queen of Batons for me, is that she is a helpful person, right? It's her interest in helping others, right? Because queen symbolically for me can represent caring and nurturing. So this would be somebody who cares and nurtures in a public way or in a societal way, right? A group of people. But working with her would require some type of collaboration, right? And then again, going with the idea about the public and something being social, this could actually be something having to do with an actual public figure. So this could be somebody in your local environment, or it could even be, maybe somebody who is well known to all of us, playing on the celebrity idea, right? So this could be somebody who's in the public eye or somebody who does public work. And then going back to the idea about, public and social, this could be somebody who is a female friend. So in the literal sense, as a person, this could be a working woman or businesswoman, somebody who's in a position of authority, somebody who is a friend, a female friend, or a person who is in the social or public eye. And so the interesting thing, as I put the card down, I read with direction in mind. So I'm noticing that she is gazing at this card. So it'll be very interesting to see what this card is, because this may be something that she's focusing on. And in here, on this side, may be something that she's not focusing on. So I want to go with the idea that I talked about, the idea of her being in the literal sense as a person. In the metaphorical sense, as an approach, we're being asked to maybe adopt an approach in which we are caring and nurturing. Again, because those are all aspects of queens for me. They represent caring, nurturing, and also something having to do with receptivity. Because I tend to look at feminine energy as being receptive. So there's something about caring, nurturing, and being receptive. Now that could again be about caring about our work. If you are in business, caring about your business. In the social sense, this could be about caring about other people in your social circles, or caring about something in the public sphere, but it's like, where are we going to demonstrate caring and nurturing this week? So that's how I would look at the Queen of Batons. So now let's take a look at the card on the left behind her. And here we have the Eight of Cups. So for me, the first thing I want to validate one of the things that I said in regards to the Queen of Batons. For me, the Eight of Cups can represent a very good friend. So it's playing, we have two cards that are reinforcing something having to do with a friend or friendship. Right? So there is that. Now, this card talks about feelings and emotions. It's from the Suit of Cups. So there may be something having to do with strong feelings about something or powerful emotions, because the 8 for me can represent power. In numerology for me, it's a number of power. So there may be something having to do with the power of the woman, or that, you know, we have strong feelings about the woman, right? And it may be feelings that she's not aware of. Remember, she's not looking at this card. Another meaning of the Eight of Cups for me can represent justice, because the 8 in Tarot de Marseille is associated with the 8th card from the Major Arcana, and that is the Justice card. So for me, this is another card that can represent justice. It could be like feelings about justice. You know, so we may be wanting justice to be done in a particular area, or that we're wanting something to be done right. It's about feeling something is right. Now, in terms of the person, if we go back to the Queen of Wands or the Queen of Batons, this card can talk about faith and trust in another person and some kind of admiration. And it would be like the admiration is mutual. So if this is an actual relationship with a woman, based on some of the characteristics that I talked about previously, then this could be about having faith and trust, and that the relationship is one of mutual admiration. Now, if we go with the idea that maybe that the woman in question, Queen of Batons, is pursuing something, remember we haven't looked at where her gaze is, that she may be focusing on something because she feels it's the right thing to do, and that would be this card in alignment with the aspects of justice, right? She feels that what she's doing is the right thing to do, or where her focus is, it's the right thing to focus on. Right, and this would be, you know, maybe feeling like there's a need for balance, because the 8 is also a number of balance. If there has been something having to do with health, I tend to look at the 8 as a number of health. Then this could represent feeling better. Right, and again, that would bring the balance and the equilibrium aspects of this card into play. So those are some of the things that I have to say about the 8 of Cups being behind the Queen of Batons. And so now let's take a look at the opposite card to see where she's looking, what her gaze is on. So here we have, so here we have the Hanged Man. So here we have a Major Arcana card, and for me, Major Arcana cards carry more weight when they show up. The first thing that I usually attribute to the Hanged Man is that this card can come up when we are being asked to consider a change in outlook or a change in perspective, because he's hanging upside down, which means that the way he sees his world is different, right? The other thing that comes up for me with this card, again, keeping with the idea that he's hanging upside down, is that this card can represent some kind of reversal or some sort of setback, or something that appears to be in limbo or on hold, or in a state of suspended animation, like in suspension. So now the first thought that's coming to me in this, if we go with the idea that the Queen of Wands is talking about a public figure, then she may be looking at a situation in which it looks like there's some sort of reversal, or she's focusing on reversing something, right? That would be the Hanged Man. And why? Her motivation is behind her, because she feels like it's the right thing to do. Right, and I'm leaning heavily on something having to do with justice. Again, remember the 8 of Cups is associated with the Justice card, so I'm really feeling like this may be more either having to do with a legal matter or something having to do with politics or the government. I'm getting a real strong sense about that. It's making me feel like there's a woman who wants to right what she perceives to be a wrong, and she's doing it because she feels it would be the right thing to do. And going with the batons being about something being social or public, she feels like it's the right thing to do for the people. That's the words that are coming to me, for the people. And going with that, I'm going to pick up on the more challenging aspect of the Hanged Man, and this usually can represent a traitor. And because he has pockets on the card, usually something having to do with money. So now, I looked at that in one way, and as I'm talking about that, or I'm thinking about that more, if we kind of bring this back down a little bit, and not so much in the societal sense or in the public sense, if there may be an issue with a friend or friendship. Remember, I talked about that with the Queen of Batons, in which we may be experiencing some inaction or some inactivity, or a sense of betrayal, going with the idea that this can represent a traitor, right? And that we're wanting to kind of right that wrong, or we're wanting to see some sort of vindication. I'm feeling like a sense of vindication. And as I'm talking about that, one thing with the Hanged Man is that there may be a situation, if it's connected to this particular situation that I'm talking about, or maybe even something else, that there's some level of accepting the situation as it is. Right, with that idea in mind, the Hanged Man has his hands behind his back, so there's a message here about maybe not having a hand in the matter. Like, the expression that's coming to me is like, don't get your hands in it, right? But if there is a sense of feeling wronged or feeling betrayed by someone this week, in particular a woman, then this card is asking, what would you be willing to do to change your perspective or change your outlook, and maybe even start the forgiveness process, if you're able to do so. And then the only other thing, because I mentioned this with the health aspect of the Eight of Cups, this card sometimes for me can represent hospitalization. So somebody may have had a situation where they were hospitalized, and they may be reversing that situation. Right, meaning like they're going back to the Eight of Cups, meaning that they're starting to feel better, or they're in a recovery process. Right? And part of the recovery process, I'm being said to say, may involve them not doing anything. Right? Again, because the Hangman is hanging upside down and his hands are behind his back, and this card, in that sense, can represent inaction or inactivity. So somebody may be given instruction or guidance about not doing anything, not being active. And if that's the case, then maybe the Queen of Batons in this regard could be either a woman who's playing a role or a part in that, meaning a woman is experiencing that because she's looking at the Hangman, or that she's going to be looking after somebody who maybe is not able to do for themselves, right? And she's doing that because it's either a friend or a relationship in which there's a great deal of faith, trust, and mutual admiration. And she feels like it's the right thing to do. So that's how I'm seeing that. And that would bring the caring and nurturing aspect of the Queen back into that interpretation, right? So that is how I would look at these cards. So again, there could be something in the larger sense, maybe something having to do with a legal matter, or something with the political sphere, or something having to do with government. But if we bring it back down to maybe something more local, something more close to home, then this could be a situation with a friend, and in the challenging sense, working through issues of being wronged, or that there's issues around caring for somebody who is not able to do much because they're in a process of recovery. Okay, so now let's take a look at the bottom tier of cards, starting with the card on the left. We have the house of God. In Tarot de Marseille, la maison de translates to house of God. So it's more commonly known as a tower, but I like to call it house of God when I'm working with Marseille. So first thing that I want to say to validate what I just said about the Hangman, this is a card that could represent a hospital, because that is what the house of God, back in the time that the Tarot de Marseille was becoming popular, that's what the house of God represented. It represented a hospital, a place of healing, right? So in the literal sense, I'm going to say, again, this is reinforcing this idea that there's somebody who may be recovering from a stint in the hospital. And I'm saying that because I'm looking at the figures on the card, and they look like they're falling out from the building, right? So it's, the expression that's coming to me is like somebody who got sprung or discharged from the hospital, yeah? Right? That's what I'm seeing in the moment. So it could be somebody's aftercare. You know, they were in the hospital, they're being released from the hospital, they're being discharged, and now they have to be looked after. So that is one aspect, right? In the maybe more metaphorical sense, if we're going with the idea that this is about healing, and then that brings the Suit of Cups back into play, because for me, that is also one of my meanings for the Suit of Cups as a whole. It can represent healing. So it could be healing in the physical sense, but I'm also going to say maybe healing in the emotional sense if there has been a situation regarding another person and we have felt wronged or betrayed, whatever the word is that you want to put in there. But it's about like recovering from that. Now, it could also have been like the situation may have been a shock or a surprise, because for me, this card can represent shocks and surprises. You know, something that was unexpected, something that we didn't anticipate and didn't see coming. Or that there was some sort of blow up, right? I'm looking at the wind or the storm hitting the top of the tower. So this could be like a stormy time, you know, a blow up, a shake up, you know, with the people looking like they're falling from the building. This could be a falling out, you know, some kind of breakdown. That could be a breakdown in the relationship, right? If I put the card down and if I read going up, this could be a breakdown in a relationship with a very good friend, right? And if the Queen of Wands, let's say, can represent some women who are watching this video, with her not looking at this, didn't see it coming, right? Because she's not looking at these cards. Now, if I go with the idea that this could be talking about maybe something larger, maybe in the more legal sense or political sense, this would be something being revealed. Because for me, this card can represent a revelation. And sometimes I call this the truth bomb card, right? And it could be like a situation where it's blowing up in someone's face, and that's metaphorically, right? Like some sort of explosive news or explosive revelation or revelation that shakes things up, right? Because now remember, this is in the position as one of the outcomes, right? So here we have an outcome where there may be something explosive, some sort of revelation. There could be some sort of falling out. But also in the positive sense, if the Hanged Man is talking about maybe something that is in a state of suspended animation, there's nothing going on, it's like a period of inaction, right? Something being on hold, then this card would say something happens with that, because the positive aspect of this card for me can represent liberation. So that would be like something getting freed up, some kind of energy getting freed up, right? And it gets things moving again, right? It could also be that there may be some kind of idea. I tend to look at this card as like an epiphany, an aha, going with the idea of revelation, right? An epiphany, an aha moment. some kind of realization, right? Because the crown at the top of the building can represent one's crown chakra, right? And ideas come in through our crown chakra, right? Right? And as I'm talking about the crown, I just realized this. It could be something having to do with somebody in a position of authority, right? If the crown can represent, a crowning achievement, or, somebody who holds a position of authority because they wear a crown, so to speak, this could represent something being affected or something affecting that authority, right? If we go with the idea that there is something having to do with maybe a working woman or a woman in business, remember I talked about that, a woman in a position of authority, this could be abdication, right? This could be where there's some sort of shakeup and maybe she has to leave her position. Right? So those are some aspects of the house of God in the positive sense. This card can represent healing. And that could be healing in the physical sense or in the emotional, metaphorical sense. Or that there's going to be some kind of shakeup or some kind of revelation. Right? In business, it's making me feel like downsizing or restructuring. So that could be a possibility too, but also maybe in the more metaphorical sense. What do we need to downsize and what do we need to restructure in our lives, right? And then that would make sense as I put the card back down. Then we go back up to the Eight of Cups. This is about feeling a need for order, right? So those are aspects of the House of God. And so now I'm going to move on to the middle card. And here we have the Moon. Okay, so here we have a lot of major arcana cards. This is the third one. So this is a week where we're going to be experiencing maybe some important issues or events because of the number of major arcana cards that continually show up. So now, first thing with the Moon, for me, this card can represent, some sort of confusion or some sort of uncertainty. But if we go with the idea, I'm going to put the card down. If we go with the idea that the House of God is talking about a revelation, then this could be a revelation of something that was in the dark, because the Moon for me can represent night, and with that it could represent being in the dark. And in the challenging sense, sometimes this card can represent like deception. So there may be something, and again, this would make sense if we go with the idea that the Hanged Man can represent a traitor, right? Or the sense of betrayal. And then this could be the revelation of a secret, a revelation of some kind of mystery, even a revelation of some kind of deception. Now, in the more positive sense, the Moon card can represent being led and guided by our intuition, right? The dogs or the wolves on the card for me can represent our instincts, right? And that would make sense with the idea that we have a card from the Suit of Cups. That's water energy, and our intuition is our feeling nature, and we have a whole body of water here on the card. So it's reinforcing that idea about, being led and guided by our intuition. And if I go with that, then House of God here, the energy here with the crown, this could be, divine downloads or intuitive information that comes in like a flash of insight or a flash of clarity. Information that comes like a bolt out of the blue. That would be like an intuitive prompt, right? So we have two cards that could be reinforcing that. And if somebody is going through the process of healing, I talked about it maybe in the physical sense, with the idea about being in the hospital and being discharged. In another sense, and this would be more internal, sometimes for me, the House of God and the Moon card, when they're together, could be somebody who's experiencing or considering the idea of engaging in psychotherapy, because these are two psychotherapy cards, right? And without going too far into that realm, sometimes this card, the House of God, could suggest an actual breakdown, right, that led up to the need for therapy. So I will say, if you're feeling like you're getting to that point, I would urge you to contact someone, speak to someone that could help you move through that. And that would be a way to bring back the Queen of Wands. That would be about seeking help or seeking assistance. And that may be through maybe a public program or something that's offered to the public, right? Or that the therapist in question is going to be a woman because she's right above the Moon card. Now, I will say this. There could also be a situation where somebody's dealing with uh, a mother figure or somebody who's like mom, because the Moon card for me can represent women and maternal energy, and then with the Queen, a woman card on top of it could be reinforcing something about that. The other thing with the Moon card I will say is that another aspect of this card can sometimes be that if we are planning things this week, there may be schedule changes or changes on the calendar that kind of shift things. You know, we may have to pay attention to any changes in our schedule or changes in our calendar that we'll have to make. And sometimes I add this to that. If that is the case, then it's usually about some sort of situation that was beyond your control, right? Because sometimes the majority of major arcana cards for me can represent external factors that are beyond our control. So it may be something that you can control, there's nothing you can do about it, but you may be on the end where your schedule gets changed as a result of it, right? And again, that may be something that involves a woman, right? A woman may play into that change in schedule, a change in calendar. And then the last thing that I want to say is that with the Hanged Man, the Hanged Man can represent awareness or enlightenment as a result of a change in perspective. And then these cards are making me feel like maybe intuitive information, right? Then if that's the case, then this card here, one of my other meanings for the Eight of Cups is that this card can represent a guardian angel. So there may be messages from our angels. If you are an angel person, you work with angels, you may be receiving information from your angels this week. And so it could be flashes of insight, right? Or it could even be through our dreams, because the Moon is a dream card for me. Or that somebody who works with angels may be seeking to work with a teacher, because the Queen of Batons for me can represent a teacher or an instructor, right? A person who wants to be helpful in shifting your perspective or your outlook, right? She helps facilitate a process of awareness, right? And if I even go with the idea here about maybe an angel medium or angel channel, then the Hanged Man can also be about clairvoyance. And then that would make sense with the House of God and the crown energy, right? I'm thinking about the crown chakra and the third eye chakra, right? And that would be ways of receiving intuitive information, right? Through the crown and through the third eye chakra. Okay, so now let's take a look at the last card rounding out this reading for this week. And we have, oh, another major arcana card. This is interesting. So here we have the Pope. So now the first thing that I want to say, because we have so many major arcana cards on the table this week, there may be something having to do with our spiritual growth and development, right? And in that regard, the Pope can represent a spiritual authority figure or a religious authority figure. So that would just reinforce what I just said about working with a teacher, right, regarding, angel work or being an angel medium or channel, right? This card would validate that, right? And in that regard, this card is about blessing, right? If you look at his hands, he's offering a blessing, right? So that's a sign of blessing or approval, right? So if that resonates with you, then this card is probably giving you the go-ahead to move in that direction, right? Now, one thing I will offer is because I am seeing myself, I gave a talk earlier in the week, and one of the things I talked about was oracle cards and some oracle card themes, right? And so one of those was angels, because I have a number of angel card decks. So with that, the idea here that I want to present with this card is about, like, what are your beliefs about angels? If you are wanting to work with angels, or you're wanting to work with an angel medium or an angel channel to help further your ability to connect, right, to communicate, then it's about also considering what do you believe to be true about angels, right? Because in this regard, this card can represent beliefs and belief systems. So I'm going with the idea that this card first and foremost can represent a spiritual or religious authority figure, or spiritual teacher, spiritual leader. Okay, so now if we go with some other possibilities, another possibility, especially with the house of God, I'm going to put the card down now, but with the house of God, the Pope can represent institutions, right? Institutions, so this could be, again, institutions like societal institutions, because one of the things for me, this card can represent socialization, right? So this can be about societal norms or customs, things like that. And there may be something along those lines that they're being called into question this week, right? If we go with the idea that this is talking about maybe something having to do with the government or maybe something more political, then there may be something about the customs or the norms or even this, the traditions, right? That traditions and norms are being dismantled, deconstructed. There's a collapse, right? Or that there may be something having to do, if I read the three cards across, there may be something having to do with a revelation about a secret or a mystery. And this might be something having to do with somebody who's either conservative, traditional, or mainstream. Those are all aspects of the Pope for me. Another thing that I noticed with the Pope, and this is in connection to the Queen of Batons. Remember, I said that this was a person in the public eye or somebody who's doing public work, that kind of thing. Then the Pope would back that up further, because I'm looking at the image, and sometimes with this card, I see this as somebody who's delivering a message to the public, right? If we go with the imagery here, this looks like mass. So I play on that with an idea that this is a message for the masses, right? So this can represent a message that's being given to the public. So this could be public speaker or somebody who's giving a message to the public. If we go with the idea of institutions and traditions, this could be maybe broadcast media, you know, something being televised, right? Something going on the record, so to speak, right? Because it's being given to the public. So this could even be like a press conference, right? And if I mirror the cards, and if I go with that, then this could be something having to do with the speaker. And I'm trying not to get too terribly political here, because I try not to talk about politics too much on my channel. But I'm seeing that this could be something having to do with the Speaker of the House this week. So it'll be very interesting, because I do watch the news and I'm aware of what's going on. So it'll be very interesting, because I do believe that they're going to be having public hearings this week coming up. And so it'll be very interesting to see what's going to be said, what's going to be on the record, you know, what's going to be revealed, right? Going with the idea, if we mirror these two cards, is about, remember, revelations, right? So it may be very interesting to see what happens over the course of the week. Now, if you are going through, I'm going to bring this back down a little bit more, make it more local, or make it a little more relative. Then if you are going through a challenging situation with another party, right, then this card here could be about faith, right? It's about keeping the faith, right? Going with the idea that this could represent religion and spirituality, right? So it's about keeping the faith, right? So if you are going through a challenging time, this would say don't lose faith, right? And then the other thing here, I will say that maybe somebody is making a shift with their religious path or spiritual path, because this card could represent, you know, leaving or falling out from a certain kind of institution, and that may be more of a religious or spiritual one. I'm hearing the song in my head, Losing My Religion, which is why I'm saying that. And so there's one more thing I want to do because the Pope is looking to the right. I want to draw another card to see what more do we need to know about the possible idea of something being blessed or approved. So you may not be able to see me, but that sound you're hearing is me shuffling the cards because I'm going to be drawing an additional card. So I'm asking as I'm shuffling, what more do we need to know about where the Pope is looking, or what's being blessed or approved? All right, so now I'm cutting the deck, and I'm cutting away from me because this is not about me. Now I'm going to fan the cards. I'm going to try and do it above the cards on the table. There we go. And so now I'm going to pick one card, and I'm immediately seeing this card. So I'm going to put that next to the Pope, and I'll leave the cards on the table, or not. So now I'm going to take a look at the card, and here we have, okay, so here we have the Ace of Swords. The first thing that I want to say is that there's going to be some kind of decision made regarding a matter this week, right? So it's about, maybe having faith. And I just realized that idea about faith repeats because we have it with the Pope, and I said it with the Eight of Cups. So there's something about faith, right? So that would be about keeping the faith or having faith in either a situation or a person or even yourself, right? So, but the first thing that I want to say about the Ace of Swords, for me, this card can represent the mind. Very interesting, right? We talked about the mind with the card, the House of God. And so here we have it again. And we also have, take a look at the image. We have a big old crown at the top of the card, right? So there's something having to do with either our crown chakra. This is another card for me that would represent an idea coming in through our crown chakra because the sword is going up through the crown, right? Or something having to do with a crowning achievement, or someone who holds some kind of position of authority, because we have the crown repeated in 3 cards, 4 cards, right? If I count the Pope too, because the Pope has a crown as well, right? So there's something about a crown. But this could be about a decision being made, needing to make our mind up about something. Another one of my meanings for this card is about a secret. So again, I said that with the moon. So I'm just looking for messages that repeat because that reinforces that particular one. So there's something about a secret possibly. For me, the Ace of Swords can also represent a triumph, a victory, or some sort of success. Right? Again, going with the idea that the crown can represent a crowning achievement. And I will say this, if we're going with the idea that we're talking about the Pope representing a message for the masses, a public message, somebody speaking in public, then I'm looking at this. Swords for me can represent information, and this could be the handling of new information. And if we look at the imagery, all those little, to me, they look like little flickers of flame, right, around the Ace of Swords. So this could be like handling something that's potentially red hot. Yeah, and I'm hearing you probably won't know the reference, but I'm hearing a song called Red Hot by a singer named Princess. So there could be handling something that is potentially red hot in terms of information. And that would make sense because the sword is red, right? And if we are talking about maybe the potential for somebody to abdicate their position, especially if it's a position of authority, then this card would represent a job or career change. That's another one of my meanings for this card. Now, aces usually represent something starting out, or the potential for something, or a new phase or chapter. And this could be lifestyle. And so if that's the case, then this card would suggest sometimes a bit of a bumpy start, but not to be deterred. because you are on the right path because of the aspect of success with this card. Oh, and then the one last thing I will say, and I'll wrap this up, is that this card can represent the truth of a matter, right? Not only does it represent, a triumph, victory, or success, but it also represents the truth. It represents clarity and the truth. So there may be a message being given. I'll slide this over just a little bit. There may be a message being given in public that has to do with the truth. There's making me feel like something about the truth coming out. And so that could be, again, in the larger sense, I talked about either something legal or something political. There may be some truth that comes out. And it's about how do we handle that new information that once it comes out, right? But in a more personal sense, this could be you come to some understanding about the truth of a situation. Remember, the hangman talked about accepting something as it is. And then that leads to maybe getting some truth about a matter or some sort of clarity about a matter. And that would make sense too if the moon is talking about confusion and uncertainty, then we gain some sort of clarity about it, right? But it may start with a shift or a change in outlook or perspective, right? And then receiving some kind of sudden and clear insight. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a very tarot-tastic week. Take care.